blood washed down the windshield in sheets of freezing rain. When a single father pulled a dying woman in a shattered police uniform from a burning wreckage, he thought he was saving a local hero. He didn't know he had just rescued a billionaire or triggered a deadly citywide manhunt. The rain on the night of October 14th didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to punish the earth. Aldo Tucker gripped the steering wheel of his heavy-duty flatbed tow truck, his knuckles white, his eyes straining against the hypnotic sweep of the windshield wipers. It was past 2 in the morning. He was exhausted, his back aching from a 12-hour shift, hauling wrecked sedans out of ditches. But his mind was fixed on one thing, getting back to his 6-year-old daughter Lily, who was fast asleep at home, under the watchful eye of their elderly neighbor. Route 119 was a desolate stretch of winding asphalt, cutting through the dense evergreen forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was notorious for black ice and blind curves, a graveyard for careless drivers. As Aldo rounded a sharp bend, known locally as Dead Man's Hook, his headlights caught something unnatural, a violent, jagged tear in the heavy steel guardrail. Aldo eased his foot off the gas. He was a man who minded his own business, a quiet mechanic and single father, trying to survive in a town that had forgotten him. But before he took over the auto shop, Aldo had spent 6 years as a combat medic. The instinct to assess a disaster zone never truly washed out of a man's blood. Pulling his rig onto the muddy shoulder, he grabbed a heavy flashlight and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The beam of light cut through the dark, sweeping over the crushed guardrail and down the steep, wooded embankment. 60 feet below, resting at a terrifying angle against a massive pine tree, was a crushed black SUV. Smoke and steam hissed from the crumpled hood, billowing into the icy rain. Aldo scrambled down the muddy slope, slipping and sliding over wet rocks and pine needles. As he got closer, the flashlight beam illuminated the vehicle. It was an unmarked police interceptor, equipped with hidden strobes in the grille that were currently sparking and short-circuiting. The driver's side door was caved in, the window completely shattered. "Hey!" Aldo shouted over the roar of the rain, shining his light into the cabin. "Can you hear me?" Inside, pinned behind a deployed airbag, was a woman. She was clad in a dark tactical police uniform, a heavy ballistic vest strapped over her chest, her head slumped forward, her blonde hair matted with blood. Aldo ripped the mangled door open, the metal groaning in protest. He reached out, pressing 2 fingers against her carotid artery. Her pulse was erratic, a fluttering, weak rhythm that told him she was rapidly going into shock. "Hold on, officer. I've got you," Aldo muttered, pulling his cell phone from his heavy canvas jacket to dial 911. Before his thumb could hit the screen, a bloodied, freezing hand shot out and gripped his wrist with surprising, desperate strength. "No!" She choked out her voice, a wet, ragged rasp. She forced her head up, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. "No dispatch. Don't call them." Aldo stared at her, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "You're bleeding out. I don't have the equipment to stabilize you here. You need an ambulance." "If you call them," she gasped, coughing up a spatter of dark blood, "they will finish the job." Aldo's flashlight drifted downward. Below her ballistic vest, just above her hip, the fabric of her tactical pants was soaked in a dark, spreading crimson. It wasn't a laceration from the crash. It was a clean, unmistakable puncture. She had been shot. Aldo's military training kicked into overdrive. An armed, wounded police officer telling a civilian not to call the police meant he had just stepped into the middle of something incredibly dangerous. The logical move was to walk away. But looking down at the dying woman, Aldo knew he couldn't leave her to bleed out in the mud. "I'm going to move you," Aldo said, his voice dropping into a calm, authoritative cadence. "It's going to hurt." He didn't wait for her permission. Unbuckling her seatbelt, Aldo carefully maneuvered her out of the crushed cabin, draping her left arm over his shoulder and lifting her into a fireman's carry. She let out a muffled cry of agony before going completely limp. The climb back up the slick embankment was grueling. His lungs burned, and his boots fought for traction in the sliding mud, but he managed to haul them both up to the shoulder. He laid her across the bench seat of his tow truck, blasted the heater to combat the hypothermia setting in, and threw his rig into gear. Aldo didn't drive to the county hospital. Instead, he drove 20 miles in the opposite direction, deep into the woods, to an old, rusted, corrugated metal garage attached to his secluded cabin. It was his sanctuary, a place where he restored vintage cars far from the prying eyes of the town. After carrying her inside and laying her out on a clean workbench, Aldo went to work. He cut away the heavy tactical gear, tossing the Kevlar vest to the floor. When he removed her jacket, a heavy silver badge fell onto the concrete. It read, Sergeant R. Dawson. He cleaned the wound on her side. It was a through-and-through gunshot, a 9mm round standard police issue. It had missed her vital organs, but nicked an artery, causing severe blood loss. Using a trauma kit he kept from his army days, Aldo clamped the bleeder, packed the wound with hemostatic gauze, and stitched it tightly. He hooked her up to an IV of saline he kept for emergencies, praying it would be enough to keep her blood pressure from bottoming out. For the next 6 hours, Aldo sat in a grease-stained folding chair beside the workbench, watching her chest rise and fall. He wiped the mud and dried blood from her face, realizing she couldn't have been older than 32. She didn't have the hardened, weathered look of a street cop. Her skin was immaculate, her hands soft, lacking the calluses of a patrol officer. Something was terribly wrong. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the garage, the silence was deafening. Aldo looked at the police badge on the floor, then at the dying woman on his table, wondering if saving her life had just forfeited his own. The harsh fluorescent lights of the garage buzzed loudly as morning broke. The rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle, drumming rhythmically against the tin roof. Aldo was wiping oil from a wrench, nursing a cup of black day-old coffee, when he heard a sharp intake of breath. He turned. The woman was awake. She shot up on the workbench, wincing in excruciating pain, her hands frantically searching her waistline for a weapon that was no longer there. "Easy," Aldo said, stepping forward with his hands raised, palms open. "You tear those stitches and I don't have enough blood to put back in you. You're safe." She froze her chest, heaving, scanning the dimly lit garage. Vintage car parts, engine hoists, and heavy machinery surrounded her. Finally, her eyes settled on Aldo. "Who are you?" she demanded. Her voice was weak, but it carried an undeniable edge of authority, the tone of someone used to giving orders and having them obeyed immediately. "I'm Aldo Tucker. I run the tow company in town. I pulled you out of your wrecked cruiser on Route 119 last night." He grabbed a fresh bottle of water and held it out to her. "You took a bullet to the oblique, passed right through. You've got 2 broken ribs and a minor concussion. Drink this." She hesitated, then took the bottle, taking small, measured sips. Her eyes darted to her shredded tactical uniform sitting in a pile by the door. "Sergeant Dawson, right?" Aldo asked, nodding toward the silver badge resting on a tool cart. "Or at least that's what the tin says. But your hands don't look like they've ever held a baton or typed a police report." The woman set the water bottle down, closing her eyes for a brief moment, as if calculating her next move. When she opened them, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating steel. "The badge belonged to the woman who died so I could wear it," she said quietly. Aldo's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "My name is Valerie Clark." Aldo stared at her. The name rang a bell, a loud one, but it took his sleep-deprived brain a second to place it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and typed the name into a search engine. Instantly, his screen flooded with identical headlines: Billionaire tech heiress missing at sea. CEO of Clark Global feared dead in yacht explosion. He looked up from the screen, his blood running cold. Clark Global was a colossal defense contracting conglomerate. They manufactured everything from military drones to advanced encrypted communication networks used by the government. The woman sitting on his workbench in a stolen police uniform was worth billions. The news says you died 3 days ago off the coast of Seattle, Aldo said slowly. That was the plan, Valerie said, grimacing as she adjusted her posture. My own board of directors arranged it. They want a merger with a foreign defense contractor, a deal I vetoed. It compromises national security protocols. But with me out of the picture, the merger goes through and they make billions. So what's with the cop outfit? I survived the explosion on the yacht, Valerie explained, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. I made it to shore and contacted the one person I thought I could trust, Jeffrey Ross. He's the chief of police in this county. He was a close friend of my late father. Aldo felt a knot twist in his stomach. Chief Jeffrey Ross was practically royalty in the county. He ran the local police force like a private militia. Ross sent a discreet tactical team to extract me, Valerie continued. Sergeant Dawson gave me her spare uniform so I could blend in with them. We were supposed to be driving to a secure federal safe house, but halfway down Route 119, the detail turned on us. They weren't taking me to a safe house, Aldo. They were taking me to the woods to put a bullet in my head. Ross, Aldo whispered. He's on their payroll. Exactly. Dawson realized what was happening. She drew her weapon, bought me time to get into the driver's seat. She took 3 rounds to the chest. I took 1 to the side as I sped off. They ran me off the road a few miles later. I thought I was dead until you broke that window. Aldo backed away, running a hand through his coarse hair. He was a father. He had a little girl sleeping in the cabin not 50 yards away. He had spent years building a quiet, invisible life for them, and now he had the most hunted woman in the state bleeding on his workbench. I have to take you to the FBI, Aldo said. I can't hide you here. If Ross's men find you, if you contact anyone, they will intercept it. Valerie interrupted, her tone sharp. Clark Global built the dispatch routing systems for this entire state. Ross's people will be monitoring every 911 call, every radio frequency. If you try to hand me over, they will kill me, and they will kill you for knowing too much. Before Aldo could argue, a violent, rattling knock echoed through the garage. Aldo froze. Valerie's eyes went wide, terror flashing across her face. "Daddy!" A small, sleepy voice called out from the other side of the heavy metal door. Aldo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He rushed to the side door and opened it. Standing there in pink dinosaur pajamas, rubbing her eyes, was Lily. "Hey, Bug," Aldo said softly, kneeling down to block her view of the bloody workbench. "What are you doing up so early? Mrs. Gable was supposed to keep you in the house." "Mrs. Gable fell asleep on the couch," Lily mumbled, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I heard a truck outside. I got scared." Aldo's blood turned to ice. "A truck!" He stood up, carrying Lily, and peered through the small, grimy window of the garage door. Parked at the edge of his gravel driveway, their headlights cutting through the morning fog, were 2 black, unmarked police SUVs. They tracked the tow truck, Valerie whispered from behind him, having painfully limped over to peek through another pane of glass. She looked at Aldo, her eyes locked onto Lily. "Aldo, if they see me, they will kill her too. You have to hide me. Now." Aldo's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at his innocent daughter, then at the desperate billionaire bleeding on his floor. Under the floorboards, by the air compressor, Aldo commanded quietly, pointing to a heavy rug in the corner. "There's an old mechanic's pit. Get in and don't make a sound." As Valerie scrambled into the dark, oil-stained hole, heavy fists began pounding on the main garage door. "Tucker!" A gruff, muffled voice shouted from outside. "Open up, police!" Aldo set Lily down, his mind racing. He wiped a smudge of oil onto his face to look like he'd been working, grabbed a wrench, and walked toward the rolling metal door. He was stepping into a war he never asked for, and the only way out was straight through the fire. Aldo hit the heavy red button on the wall. The motorized metal door ground upward with a rusted, agonizing screech, revealing the two unmarked SUVs idling in the fog. 3 men stood in the driveway, completely ignoring the freezing drizzle. They wore dark, tactical windbreakers, their hands resting uncomfortably close to the holstered weapons at their hips. The man in the center, a broad-shouldered enforcer with a scarred chin and dead, flat eyes, stepped forward. Aldo recognized him immediately, Lieutenant Harrison, Chief Ross's right-hand man. "Morning, Aldo." Harrison said, his voice a gravelly monotone. His eyes darted past Aldo, scanning the dimly lit garage. "Working early or just getting home?" "A bit of both, Harrison," Aldo replied, keeping his tone perfectly level. He rested his grease-covered wrench against his thigh. "Had a late call. Pulled a wrecked Honda out of a ditch near mile 12. What can I do for the department at 6 in the morning?" Harrison's gaze dropped to Lily, who was hiding behind Aldo's leg, clutching the fabric of his jeans. "Cute kid. Sorry to wake her. We're looking for a stolen police cruiser. GPS went dark on Route 119 around 2 a.m. We noticed your rig has some fresh mud on the duals." "Like I said, mile 12, it's a swamp out there," Aldo said smoothly. Harrison stepped into the garage. He didn't ask for permission. He walked slowly, his heavy boots crunching against the concrete. He paused near the workbench, where Valerie had been lying just moments ago. Aldo's heart stopped. He had wiped the table, but he couldn't remember if he had mopped the floor. Harrison looked down. Near the leg of the bench, a thick, dark puddle stained the concrete. "Looks like you've got a leak, Tucker," Harrison murmured, leaning in closer to inspect the dark fluid. "Transmission fluid," Aldo said, without missing a beat, praying the dim lighting hid the crimson hue of the blood. "Blew a line on the winch, just patched it." Harrison stared at the puddle for a long, agonizing second. Then slowly he straightened up. "Well, if you see anything unusual, Aldo, you call dispatch directly. Chief Ross considers this a matter of national security. You wouldn't want to get caught in the middle of that." "I just fix cars, Harrison. I don't follow the news." "Good man," Harrison sneered. He tipped his head till Lily turned on his heel and walked out. The garage door rattled shut, plunging the space back into a tense, buzzing silence. Aldo waited until the sound of their tires faded down the mountain road. He immediately bolted to the air compressor, hauled the heavy rug aside, and pulled the wooden floorboards up. Valerie was huddled in the dark pit, clutching her bleeding side, her face pale and covered in grime. Aldo helped her up. "They're gone, but they aren't stupid. They'll run my tow logs. When they realize dispatch never gave me a call for a Honda at mile 12, they'll be back. And they won't knock next time." "We need to go," Valerie gasped, leaning heavily against the workbench. She reached down into a tactical boot and pulled out a small, blood-smeared titanium USB drive. "Everything is on here. The illegal merger documents the offshore accounts, funding Ross's men the assassination orders. If I can get this to a federal mainframe, it bypasses Clark Global's local servers. It triggers an automatic lockdown of the board of directors and alerts the FBI. Where is the nearest hard line?" Aldo asked, his mind shifting from civilian mechanic back to combat medic. "The county telecommunications hub," Valerie replied. It's 10 miles north up the mountain ridge. Aldo shook his head. That's a fortress. It's surrounded by chain link and security gates. I own the company that built the gates, Aldo. I have the master override codes. But I can't drive. Aldo looked at his daughter, who was staring up at them with wide, frightened eyes. He couldn't leave her here, not with Harrison prowling the woods. He grabbed his old military duffel bag and began tossing in trauma supplies, a heavy maglite, and the loaded .45 caliber pistol he kept locked in his desk. "Lilybug, listen to me," Aldo said, kneeling to her eye level. "We're going to go for a ride in the big truck, but I need you to be braver than you've ever been." "Can you do that?" Lily nodded bravely. "Like a soldier, Daddy. Just like a soldier." Aldo turned to Valerie. The billionaire CEO looked battered, bleeding, and exhausted, but the fire in her eyes was burning brighter than ever. "My tow truck is too slow," Aldo said, tossing her a clean, heavy flannel shirt to cover her bloodied uniform. "If we're going to outrun Ross's kill squad, we need something with teeth." He walked to the back of the garage and grabbed a heavy canvas tarp covering a massive, hulking silhouette. With one sharp pull, he threw the tarp to the floor. Beneath it sat a fully restored matte black 1978 Ford F250 Highboy. But it wasn't stock. Aldo had reinforced the chassis, installed a 460 cubic inch V8 engine, and welded heavy-duty steel brush guards to the front and rear bumpers. It was a battering ram on wheels. "Get in," Aldo ordered. The matte black truck roared to life, its massive engine echoing like thunder inside the tin garage. Aldo strapped Lily into the center console seat, securing her with a heavy safety harness, while Valerie painfully pulled herself into the passenger seat. Aldo slammed the truck into gear and burst through the closed garage doors, shattering the rotting wood into a million splinters. They tore down the muddy logging roads, bypassing the main highways. The rain had intensified, washing out the dirt paths and turning the mountain into a treacherous slip and slide. Aldo wrestled the heavy steering wheel, his military driving instincts taking over as they fishtailed through the dense pine forests. "They're on us!" Valerie shouted over the roar of the engine. Aldo glanced in his rearview mirror. 2 pairs of glaring halogen headlights were rapidly closing the distance through the rain. Harrison hadn't gone far. He had left his men to watch the perimeter. "Hold on!" Aldo yelled. He slammed on the brakes as they approached a hairpin turn. The massive Ford slid sideways, the heavy all-terrain tires biting into the mud. The lead SUV, unable to stop its momentum on the slick mud, sailed past them, crashing violently through the tree line and plunging into a shallow ravine. But the second SUV, driven by Harrison, was smarter. It slowed, taking the turn cleanly, and accelerated, ramming directly into their rear bumper. The impact sent a shudder through the Ford. Lily let out a terrified shriek. "Keep your head down, Bug," Aldo commanded. He floored the accelerator, the V8 engine, screaming as they crested the ridge. Ahead of them, cutting through the fog, were the towering steel antennas of the county telecommunications hub. A heavy 12-foot-high steel security gate blocked the access road. "The gate!" Aldo yelled. "Give me the code." "There's no time to type it in," Valerie yelled back, gripping the dashboard. "Hit it." Aldo didn't hesitate. He downshifted, burying the gas pedal. The heavy steel brush guard of the F250 struck the security gate at 60 miles per hour. The sound of rending metal split the air as the locking mechanism shattered, throwing the massive chain-link doors wide open. They skidded to a halt in front of the main server building. Aldo grabbed his .45 and kicked his door open. "Go upload it. I'll hold them off." Valerie scrambled out of the truck, clutching the USB drive, and limped frantically toward the facility's heavy security door. She punched a master code into the keypad, and the door hissed open. Aldo took cover behind his driver's side door as Harrison's SUV tore through the broken gates, slamming on the brakes. Harrison and 2 heavily armed tactical officers poured out of the vehicle raising suppressed automatic rifles. "It's over, Tucker," Harrison barked, taking aim. "Put the gun down and hand her over, or I put you and the kid in the ground right now." "You're going to have to go through me," Aldo growled, raising his weapon. Bullets chewed through the heavy steel of the truck door. Aldo returned fire his military precision, dropping one of the tactical officers with a clean shot to the shoulder. Harrison cursed, laying down a barrage of suppressing fire that shattered the truck's windows. Aldo ducked, shielding Lily with his own body. Inside the facility, Valerie crashed into the main server room. She shoved the panicked night shift technician aside and slammed the titanium USB drive into the master terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the local firewalls. The terminal screen flashed green, uploading to federal mainframe. File 1, Clark _ global _ financial _ logs.decrypted. File 2, Ross _ wire _ transfers.pdf. File 3, operation _ blackout _ audio.wav. Outside, Aldo was out of ammo. The slide of his pistol locked back empty. Harrison, sensing the shift, grinned and stepped forward, leveling his rifle at Aldo's head. "Stupid choice, mechanic," Harrison sneered. Before Harrison could pull the trigger, the sky above them erupted with a deafening roar. 3 heavily armored FBI tactical helicopters broke through the cloud cover, their massive spotlights, blinding Harrison and his men. Sirens began to wail from the mountain road below as dozens of state trooper vehicles, the ones not on Ross's payroll, swarmed the compound. The upload had worked. The federal alert had triggered a massive immediate response from the FBI field office in Seattle. Harrison dropped his rifle, his face going pale as laser sights from the helicopters danced across his chest. He fell to his knees, raising his hands. Aldo let out a ragged, exhausted breath, slumping against the bullet-riddled side of his truck. He opened the rear door and pulled Lily into a tight, desperate embrace. Moments later, Valerie emerged from the facility. She was surrounded by federal agents, but she pushed through them, limping over to Aldo and Lily. The cold, calculating billionaire was gone. In her place was a woman who had just stared death in the face and survived thanks to a stranger. "It's done," Valerie said softly, looking at the bullet holes in Aldo's truck. "Ross is in custody. The board is being arrested as we speak." "Good," Aldo said, resting his chin on his daughter's head. "Now, if you don't mind, I think I need to put my kid to bed." 6 months later, Aldo Tucker sat in the office of his brand-new, state-of-the-art automotive restoration facility in Seattle. He didn't have to haul wrecked cars out of ditches in the freezing rain anymore. A sleek, black town car pulled up to the glass-fronted garage. Valerie Clark stepped out, wearing a sharp designer suit, looking every bit the untouchable CEO she was born to be. She walked into the garage carrying a small wrapped present for Lily, who was busy drawing at a massive mahogany desk. Valerie approached Aldo, sliding a thick leather folder onto his workstation. "What's this?" Aldo asked, wiping grease from his hands. "That is a deed to a 500-acre ranch in Montana, fully paid for, along with an irrevocable trust fund for Lily's college tuition," Valerie said, with a warm, genuine smile. "And a contract for you to become the head of global security for Clark International, if you want it." Aldo looked at the paperwork, then at the woman whose life he had saved in the mud on Route 119. He smiled, picked up a pen, and pulled the contract toward him. Some broken things he realized were absolutely worth fixing. What an incredible story of bravery, corruption, and the ultimate twist of fate. Aldo thought he was just doing his duty, but his courage took down a massive criminal conspiracy and changed his family's life forever. If this heart-pounding rescue mission had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share it with your friends to spread the thrill and subscribe to our channel for more amazing real-life drama stories.